Hello and welcome to What's in the Night Sky for November 2024. I'm Hayley, and this month we are looking out for shadow transits of Saturn's moon Titan, Mars buzzing around near the Beehive cluster, the Lacus Mortis on the moon, and our constellation of the month, which is Cetus the sea monster. Let's begin by taking a look at the planets, starting with the planet Venus. So you can see here I'm looking towards the southwest on the afternoon of the 1st of November, and the sun has just not long set. So at the beginning of November, sunset will be around 4:30. That will vary depending on whereabouts you are in the country. And we can see that after sunset, Venus is already visible above your southwestern horizon. If we zoom in and take a closer look at it, then you can see that it's showing a gibbous phase, and you might like to point a small telescope at it if you have one so that you can see that. And as the month goes on, Venus gets better placed for observing. So by the time we get to the end of November, it will be setting about 3 hours after the sun. Sunset gets earlier as the month goes on, Venus gets higher. So the very best time to catch it is as close towards the end of November as you can. Mars is another planet that's improving as we head towards its opposition in January. And if we go back to the first of the month and just go through the night after sunset, you can see Jupiter rising in Taurus, first of all at around 7 o'clock, a little bit before 7 o'clock, followed by Mars in Cancer at just before 10 o'clock at the beginning of the month. And then if we go through the night, you can see that Mars gets nice and high and is visible all the way until sunrise. If we zoom in a little bit and take a look at Mars's position in Cancer and just see how that changes as the month goes on. I'm just going to centre us on one of these stars in Cancer just to stop things from moving around. You can see that it comes closer and closer to the Beehive cluster, and the Beehive cluster is a beautiful open cluster in Cancer, and for November it makes its closest approach to the Beehive cluster on the 30th at the end of the month. So you can watch Mars as it makes its approach towards the Beehive cluster in Cancer, and as its position for observing is improving throughout November. If you have a pair of small binoculars, then you might like to see if you can observe both Mars and the Beehive cluster together in the field of view of a small pair of binoculars. Jupiter is also approaching opposition. It reaches its opposition next month. Remembering that opposition is the time when a planet appears on the opposite side of the sky to the sun and is best placed for observing from our vantage point here on Earth. So Jupiter during November is well placed for observing. It's in the constellation of Taurus, so it's in a really interesting part of the sky. You've got the familiar shape, the triangular shape of the Taurus, the head of Taurus, the bull. You've got the Seven Sisters star cluster over here. You've got Orion over here, which was our constellation of the month last month. So if you want to go and check that out, you can do. And then up here, you've got the twins of Gemini, Castor and Pollux, and then Mars, as we've just discussed over here in Cancer. So if you are going out to observe Jupiter, there's also lots of other interesting things you can do in that part of the sky. And if we go back to a slightly earlier part of the night, then you can see that down here we've got Saturn in Aquarius. So Jupiter is all the way up here in Taurus, and we've got Saturn down here in Aquarius. And if we go back to the beginning of November and just take a look at the journey that Saturn takes across the sky over the course of a night. So we're looking towards the south here, sunset, and you can see that Saturn is already visible straight after sunset. And if we track Saturn through the course of the night, it doesn't get that high, and then it sets again around 2 in the morning. Towards the end of the month, it sets earlier, so you lose about 2 hours. It will be setting around 11 o'clock. So it's setting around 1 o'clock in the early part of the month and around 11 o'clock in the later part of the month. And Saturn is interesting at the moment because it is approaching its ring plane crossing, which is going to happen in March next year. And that is when the rings appear to be edge on to us. So that's an interesting thing in of itself, and it will be good to observe Saturn regularly over the period between now and March next year, just to see how the rings change in their appearance. It also provides us with an opportunity to observe some shadow transits of Saturn's moons. And this month, Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon, is going to give us 2 shadow transits. The first of those will be on November the 4th, starting at around 8 minutes past 9. 8 minutes past 9. I'm just going to zoom us back out because I've managed to lose Saturn, so we'll just centre back on it again. So 4th of November, 8 minutes past 9, you can see Saturn's bright moon Titan here, and you'll be able to, if you look at Saturn through a small telescope, you'll be able to see its rings through pretty much any size of telescope, and you should be able to see Titan as well. To see the shadow transit, you probably want a telescope of around 4 inches in diameter or bigger. So 4 inches being the front diameter of your telescope, either the lens on the front of your telescope or the mirror, the primary mirror. So about 4 inches or bigger, or 100 mil or bigger, to give you a good chance of seeing these shadow transits. And it will also depend on the conditions that on the night, so how good the seeing is and so on, whether you're able to see it or not. So if we just go forward in time from 8 minutes past 9, you can see, if we go a bit closer, that the bottom edge of Saturn's disk looks like it's had a little bite taken out of it, and that is Titan's shadow just encroaching onto the disk of Saturn. And if we follow it over the next few minutes, you can see its path until it's gone at about 11:15. So that first shadow transit of Titan on the 4th is it just encroaches a little bit onto the disk of Saturn. If we have a look at the second one, which occurs on the 20th, the second one's a bit better. So that starts at around 7:43. It's worth going out a good while before it's due to start, so you can get set up and you can get centered on Saturn, and you can let your eyes adapt, and depending on exactly where you are, your location, the time will vary a little bit. So you can see actually at 7:43 we already have Titan's shadow starting to encroach upon the disk of Saturn. And if we go through time, you can see that you actually get a much better shadow transit this time compared to the one on the 4th. So you could consider the 4th of November to be your practice one for this one. Also, it's worth going out and observing both of them, because they, in case the weather is bad for the second one. And if you don't manage to see either of them, there are 2 more next month as well. So we're definitely getting a treat with Saturn at the moment, with the approaching ring plane crossing and the shadow transits of Titan. So we'll finish with the planets by taking a look at Uranus and Neptune. So Uranus is approaching its opposition, and with the more distant planets, the opposition doesn't make quite so much of a difference. However, the opposition of Uranus is a good time to try to see it with your naked eye. So often when we talk about Uranus in these videos, I say that technically it should be visible to the naked eye, but actually in practice it's really difficult, and it's hard to distinguish it from the stars around it and so on. Which is all still true when Uranus is at opposition. But if you do want to try it, this will be the very best time, because it's at its opposition brightness. So opposition actually occurs on the 17th, but you can have a go throughout the month. You've got a nice pointer over here in the Pleiades, and you could approach it by trying to see it in binoculars first, and then once you've managed to find it in binoculars, you could take your binoculars away and see if you can see it with your naked eye. With your naked eye, it will just look like a very, very faint star. With a small telescope, then you might be able to make out that it's got a disk and that it's got this bluish greenish colour about it. And Neptune, again, you can look out for Neptune's bluish disk if you have a small telescope. You won't spot Neptune with your naked eye at any time. It's below naked eye brightness all the time. And if you do want to have a go at Neptune, then it is down here by Saturn, quite near to our constellation of the month actually, because our constellation of the month is Cetus this month. So you can train your small telescope on Neptune if you want to have a go at seeing whether you can see its disk and its blue colour. I want to move on to the moon now, and we'll actually start with Neptune because the moon pays a close visit to Neptune on the morning of the 12th of November. So around 1 o'clock in the morning, you can see that we've got a gibbous moon here, really close to Neptune. And if we put a pair of binoculars on, you should actually be able to see them together in a binocular field of view. So it's a good opportunity to see Neptune if you've never seen it before. The light from the, as always with these things, the light from the moon will wash out some of the light from Neptune, but you should still be able to see it, and the moon will be a very good pointer so that you can find it nice and easily. If we have a look at the moon throughout the rest of the month, so I'm just going to go back to the 4th, or start in the early part of the month at around 4:30, so not long after sunset. If we go around to Venus, and you can see that we've got a very slender crescent moon and Venus just after sunset on the 4th. It would be better actually to observe a bit later if you can, and that will depend on your horizon over here. So you need to go somewhere with a nice flat southwestern horizon, get up high if you can. My view here in Stellarium isn't great because we've got all these trees in the way. So if you've got trees and buildings and things in the way, you're not going to have much chance of seeing the moon there. If we move on to the 10th, I'm just actually going to go into the darker part of the night and head towards the 10th, so you can see the moon popping out there. And on the evening of the 10th, it's quite close to Saturn. Then we've already said that it pays a visit to Neptune on the morning of the 12th. And then if we go to the 15th, we have our full moon for November, and November's full moon is a supermoon. So remembering that a supermoon is when the moon appears a little bit larger and a little bit brighter because it's at the closest or near to the closest approach to the Earth in its orbit, and that's coinciding with the full moon. And it's quite near Uranus as well, on the night of the 15th when the moon is full. It's just down here to the south. If I put binoculars on, can't quite get it into binocular field of view. There we go. So full moon and planet Uranus. So this will be very, very bright. So it'll be interesting to try this and see whether you can see Uranus and the full moon together. Moving on to the 16th, the following day, and you've got a moon that's just past full near to the Pleiades and Jupiter. So you've got the Jupiter, the moon and the Pleiades all in Taurus on the 16th, close to Jupiter on the 17th, and Mars on the 20th and 21st. We might need to go a bit later for that. So here we go, the 20th. And you'll certainly be able to manage those two in a pair of binoculars. And the Beehive cluster down here as well. So we talked about Mars being close to the Beehive cluster earlier. So you might be able to try for all three of these on the 20th or the 21st, remembering that the Beehive cluster is quite faint. So I would try it when the moon isn't there, and then try it again when the moon is there and see what the difference is. Let's stay with the moon and take a look at our moon watch target now. So I'm just going to make the moon full. so that we can see all parts of its surface. And last month we chose the Sea of Serenity as our moonwatch target for October. The Sea of Serenity being here, where I'm ringing with my mouse now, next to the Sea of Tranquility, which is over here. And we have also recently talked about the Sea of Cold, which is up here. So if you look to the north of the Sea of Serenity and the south of the Sea of Cold, you get this area here, which is known as Lacus Mortis, or the Lake of Death. And to take a closer look at the Lake of Death, I'm going to switch over again to a different program so that we can take a closer look, or a more detailed look, at that area. So here we are again looking at the moon using Lunar Quickmap, which is some free web-based software that you can use to get a more detailed look at the surface of the moon. And when you zoom in, you get to see some high-resolution photographs that were taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. So if I want to look in detail at the moon online, then this is where I tend to come. And you can see here that we've got the Sea of Serenity that we were looking at last month. And if we look towards the north of the Sea of Serenity, we've got this area here, the Lake of Death, or Lacus Mortis. Let's go nice and close so that we can explore that area. It is around 150 kilometres wide, and if you want to observe it, the best time, as is often the case when you're observing the moon, is not to try to observe it during the full moon, but actually it's best a few days after new moon or a few days after full moon. So around 5 days after new moon or around 4 days after full moon, remembering that full moon this month is on the 15th, because that will give you the best view of the area due to the shadows that will be cast. And if you have a small pair of binoculars, then you should easily be able to pick out the Lake of Death. And if you have a small telescope, then you'll get a more detailed view of the area. The most prominent feature is this crater here called Berg, and it is a 40-kilometre diameter crater, and you should be able to see it in a small telescope. And if you want to have a slightly better view of it, then a bigger one, 4 inches or more, should reveal a little bit more of its structure and this central peak as well. It's got a mountain in the centre, as is often the case with craters on the moon. And it's relatively young. It's only about 1 billion years old. So when you look at it, it appears quite well defined, and that's because of its relative youth. And you can also see the pattern of material that was ejected out of the crater and into the rest of the lake when that impact happened. If you do observe the crater close to the terminator, so a few days after full moon, then you might notice some detail in the terraced walls around the edge of this crater as well. Surrounding Berg, you can observe the rest of the surface of the lake, and it's made of solidified lava. So like all of the seas and lakes on the moon, they're not made of water, they are made of solid rock. And you might notice that there's a contrast between the relatively smooth eastern surface of the lake and the more sort of chaotic, marked western surface of the lake. And you can explore this area with your telescope as well if you have one. Back to Stellarium to take a look at our constellation of the month, which is Cetus over here, which is Latin for whale, though usually it's depicted as a sea monster rather than a whale. And if we put the art on, you can see that this is the head of the monster, and this is the tail, and this is its body. It swims in the celestial sea along with the other watery constellations, which we'll take a look at over the next few months. So we've got Pisces over here, and we've got Aquarius, and so on. It's the fourth largest constellation in the night sky, but it can be quite tricky to spot because it lacks any really bright stars. So the easiest way to spot is to locate Aldebaran, the angry eye of the bull in Taurus, which is a very bright and easy star to find, and Fomalhaut, which is down here, very close to the horizon, and it never gets much above the horizon. And it's a little bit dimmer than Aldebaran, but still quite bright. And the only thing to be careful of with that is that it does set quite early in November. So you can see that by about 9 o'clock or a bit after 9 o'clock, it's going to set. So you want to, if you're going to use that as a pointer star, then you want to try and get out before about 9:30. So if you find those two stars, those two bright stars, and Cetus, the sea monster, is in the middle of those two bright stars. And you can also see that here on the 15th, when we've got the night of the full moon is quite near to Cetus as well, although that probably isn't the best time to try to pick out the constellation, because the light from the full moon will be washing out these stars. So better to do it on a night when the moon is not in the way. You might remember from September's edition of What's in the Night Sky that in Greek mythology, Cetus was the sea monster who was sent to devour the princess Andromeda, because Andromeda was our constellation of the month in September. And Andromeda, let's put the art back on, is up here. You can see depicted in this image as she's being chained up. So she's chained to a rock, and the monster Cetus is going to come and devour her as a sacrifice to the sea god Poseidon. The brightest star in Cetus is actually the one on the end of the tail here, which is known as Deneb Katos, meaning the tail of the whale in Arabic. Also, we have the star Mira, which is in the neck of the sea monster over here, which was the first variable star ever discovered. So a star that over a period of time varies in its brightness. And Cetus also contains quite a lot of galaxies within reach of a small telescope. And the best one is probably M77, so Messier 77, which is over here below the head of the monster. And you won't be able to see it with your naked eye because it's below naked eye brightness, but you should be able to find it as a faint smudge with a pair of binoculars, or as an elongated patch of light with a bright core in your small telescope. And it is a face-on barred spiral galaxy. So it's quite an interesting one to look at if you want to see one that is orientated completely face-on to us. This month there are a few good passes that you could try. One of them is on the 20th at about 6:04. So it's a good one if you want to go out with children because it's quite early in the evening, but still occurs when it's nice and dark. So you can see we have it here. So rising in the west and making its way across the sky over the period of about 5 or 6 minutes until it sets again in the east. That brings me to the end of our night sky tour for November, and I hope that you get clear skies for all of your observing this month.